Hi, welcome back to Online Her 74. Don't forget to subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss the latest horror stories. Without further ado, Let's get right into the story. My name is Raka. I just moved to a small town called Sidomotia, a place that's never even on the tourist map. After my mother passed away and months of being stuck in limbo due to a job loss, I felt the need for solitude. To rebuild my life from scratch. I found it by chance an old two-story house at the end of Sunyaragi Street, surrounded by a weathered wooden fence. Its windows were tightly covered by ivory lace curtains that had yellowed with time. On the front, a small, nearly collapsed sign read "For sale. Contact Ms. Laras. The price of the house. Too cheap for such a large building. When I called the number listed, a middle-aged woman's voice greeted me calmly. That house hasn't been occupied for a long time. Sir, if you're serious, I'll get the paperwork written up right away. I asked. How long has it been vacant? About 50 years. Nobody bought it. She paused. Many people came, but they didn't buy it. Maybe because, It's too old. But I didn't care. I needed a place to live. I needed my own space away from the hustle and bustle of the city, from haunting memories, and from the ever-pressing expectations of life. 2 weeks later, I officially moved into the house. I brought 2 suitcases, a bookshelf, and one big memory I wanted to forget, a framed photograph of my mother, smiling softly on the end table. The first day was quiet. Nothing unusual. Just thick dust, a few cobwebs, and damp air that looked like it hadn't moved in decades. That evening, I sat in the living room reading a book. The old chandelier hung low, giving off a warm golden yellow glow. It felt like living in a world frozen in the past. I chuckled. This house may be old, but it's not as scary as people say. I thought everything would be fine. I thought I was just moving into an empty house. I thought this house was truly empty. I thought ... but I was wrong. I thought the house was truly empty. But from that night on, I began to feel something ... different. It wasn't a major disturbance, just small things that others might overlook. But that's where it all started. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. Sunlight filtered through the gaps in the curtains. In the air, there was a faint scent I couldn't quite place, like wilted jasmine. Sweet, but with a hint of bitterness. I thought it was just the new atmosphere. An old house must have many layers of smells: damp wood, dust, and time. But when I went downstairs to the kitchen, there was a cup of tea on the table. Still warm. I was silent for a long time. I was sure I hadn't made anything that morning. I shook my head. Maybe I'd forgotten. I had a lot on my mind. The following days passed quietly. The house began to feel like mine. I repainted the walls, changed the curtains, and installed a small record player in the living room. Soft classical music filled the air, trying to dispel the emptiness that clung to every corner of the house. But the night still brought a different kind of silence. There were moments when I felt ... watched. Not uncomfortable, not afraid, but like someone was standing behind the door, staring at me silently. And every time I turned, there was no one there. On the 4th night, I sat on the back porch, gazing at the sky. The stars were perfectly visible from here, far from the city pollution. The wind blew softly, carrying the sounds of crickets and rustling leaves. Suddenly, there was a rustling sound from inside the house. It was soft, like a chair being gently moved. I got up and went back inside. Everything was as it was. The chair, the table, the books. Nothing had changed. But when I returned to my room, my heart stopped for a moment. The photo of Mom on the small table, which had previously faced out the window, was now facing directly towards my bed. It was as if someone wanted me to look at it before going to sleep. I was silent for a long time, then I forced a smile. Maybe I had turned it while cleaning. Yes, maybe so. That night, I went to sleep with the light on. For the first time, I felt this house was waiting for me, and it didn't want me to leave yet. That was my last thought before I finally fell asleep that night. I'd had a strange dream about a long, endless hallway, full of wooden doors that creaked on their own, as if waiting for something, or someone. But the most disturbing thing wasn't the dream, it was the knocking that woke me at 3 in the morning. Knock, knock, 3 soft knocks, clear, regular, coming from the wall next to my bed, the side facing directly outside the house. At first, I thought someone was messing around outside, but who would be walking around in the backyard of an old house at 3 in the morning? I forced myself to get up and opened the window blinds. It was dark, quiet, no one was outside. The next day, I tried not to think about it. I made tea, put on some music as usual, and started fixing up the attic I hadn't had time to touch. The old staircase to the attic was hidden behind the living room ceiling. covered by a wooden cover that almost blended with the ceiling. When I pulled the small rope, dust and wood chips fell, asterisk in the attic. Everything seemed frozen. An old wardrobe, large sacks filled with old things, and a small wooden doll sitting in a rocking chair. The doll stared at me. I approached slowly. There was nothing unusual, but somehow the room felt too cold. Asterisk, I looked down and saw something sticking out from under a pile of old rags. It was a family portrait in a black wooden frame. The faces in the photo were faded, but there were 4 people: father, mother, a teenage boy, and a little girl with long hair braided in 2 braids. Asterisk, but what gave me goosebumps? The girl's eyes were crossed out in thick black ink. Asterisk, it wasn't just in this photo. There were several others I'd tucked away from the back of an old suitcase in the attic. They were all the same. The girl's face was always crossed out, asterisk, and in one corner of the frame, there was a small inscription, almost erased by time. Asterisk, look back. Asterisk, look back. Asterisk, I froze. My heart leaped into my throat. Slowly, very slowly, I looked back. Empty. No one. Asterisk, but when I looked back at the photo, the little girl's eyes, the ones crossed out with ink, were open, looking at me. Those eyes, the eyes in the photo that should have died. Asterisk, I froze. Frozen. Only able to hear my own ragged breathing. I closed my eyes for a moment, then opened them again. Asterisk, the photo remained where it lay on the dusty attic floor. But the black ink scribbles on the little girl's face were truly ... gone. Asterisk, I picked up the photo with trembling hands and quickly climbed down from the attic. As soon as my feet touched the living room floor, the floorboards above creaked loudly as if something was still moving there. Asterisk, but I didn't have the courage to look again. Asterisk, I focused on examining the photo. I took it to the kitchen, turned on the lights brighter, and examined it closely. The father's hand in the photo was gripping the little girl's shoulder, and the mother's face stared straight ahead, flat and unsmiling. Asterisk, but that wasn't what caught my breath. Asterisk, in the bottom right corner of the frame, there was a name written in faded ink. Asterisk, the Weir Moja family, 1974. Asterisk, I'd never heard that name before, not when buying this house, nor when talking to Mrs. Laras, the property agent. Asterisk, I typed the name into my phone. No results. There was no data on the Weir Moja family inside Mukti, not even a news archive, as if they never existed. Asterisk, that night, I didn't sleep in my room. I sat in the living room, accompanied by a small lamp and an old radio that I played to break the silence. Asterisk, and at exactly 3 in the morning, the sound came again. Knock. ... knock. But this time, the knocking wasn't coming from the bedroom wall. It was coming from inside the attic. As if something or someone was knocking from behind the old wooden door, demanding attention. Asterisk, I froze. My breath hitched. The knocking stopped abruptly. ... replaced by a far more disturbing sound. Asterisk, the sound of soft footsteps above my head. Asterisk, walking slowly. ... from one end of the attic to the other. Then it stopped right above where I was sitting. Asterisk, I felt a chill spread from my toes to the back of my neck. There was a strange feeling, like when you know you're being watched secretly, even though you're all alone. I gripped the family photo tighter, and without realizing it, I started whispering. Asterisk, who are you guys? And why haven't you left yet? Asterisk, the question hung in the air, unanswered, but the night felt like it was holding its breath with me. There was no wind, no crickets, nothing except a silence that felt too heavy for such a small house. Asterisk, morning came late. I knew it because the broken clock in the dining room had stopped at 3 a.m. Exactly the same time the knocking came every night. Asterisk, I couldn't bear to go back into the attic. Instead, I began exploring the other corners of the house I hadn't cleaned since moving in. An old closet in the basement caught my eye. It was locked tightly, but its hinges were almost falling off from rust. I forced it open with a screwdriver. Inside, dusty and nearly empty, was a single, worn brown shoebox, covered with graffiti and stained with water stains at the corners. What it contained: old letters, dozens of them, all handwritten. Asterisk, the paper was yellowing and the edges were brittle. But most strikingly, all the letters were addressed to someone named Leela. Asterisk, Leela, dear, I'm sorry I can't come downstairs today. The weather is giving me a headache, but I'll send some bread to your sister. Okay. Asterisk, Leela, don't be afraid. If the lights go out, just light a candle and wait for mother to come. Don't leave the room, okay dear? Asterisk, the letters kept repeating themselves, with similar content: apologies, tender messages, promises to pick you up soon, and sometimes desperate sentences. But one thing that gave me goosebumps: none of them were ever sent. And even stranger, there was not a single letter from Lila. Asterisk, just her mother's voice, writing, hoping, as if speaking to someone who never answered, even until the last letter, dated July 1974. Asterisk, Lila, ... I heard your voice last night. You were singing again, the same song as before. I'll go upstairs tomorrow, I promise. If your father doesn't stop me, I'll break down the door myself. Hang in there, dear, don't put out your candle. My hands trembled as I read that last line. Song, candle, door. Asterisk, what was really happening in this house? Asterisk, I began to feel, ... something unfinished, something stuck between the walls and time, waiting for someone to retell its story. Asterisk, night fell again, and exactly at 3 a.m. Knock, ... knock. 3 soft taps on the wall, but this time, a soft voice came from the attic. Asterisk, mother, I'm still here. Asterisk, the voice was soft, broken, as if coming from a very far away place, or from someone who had waited too long to be called back. Asterisk, I was frozen in place. I didn't dare answer. I couldn't move. Asterisk, the voice was gone. There was only silence, and in that silence, the house felt more alive than ever, as if the walls had ears. The floors had memories, and the ceilings held long-buried secrets. Asterisk, the next morning, I felt the need to talk to someone, anyone, but not myself. I decided to go back to see Mrs. Laris, the real estate agent who sold me this house, but when I asked about the Wiratmaja family, her expression changed. Asterisk, she was silent for a long time before finally saying softly, Mr. Raka, that family did live there, but that was a long time ago. That house, ... shouldn't have been sold. Asterisk, why? Asterisk, she bit her lip, then looked at me with eyes that seemed to harbor old fears. Because everyone who lived there, ... left. Asterisk, left. Asterisk, not moving. Sir. Disappearing. Asterisk, I swallowed hard. Who? Asterisk, the first tenants were in the 80s. A young couple, just for a month, they left without taking anything. Then there was a new family in the 90s. Their kids got sick. Then they left too, never to return. And so on. But no one stayed longer than a month? Asterisk, I asked, why? The answer was quiet, almost a whisper. Because the house hasn't finished saying goodbye. Asterisk, I didn't know what she meant, but I knew one thing. I couldn't leave. Not yet. Asterisk, I returned home, my mind reeling, but a sense of purpose began to grow within me. I wanted to know what had happened to Lila. Asterisk, who was she? Why did her voice still linger here? Asterisk, that evening, I sat in the living room with a stack of mail on my lap. The old radio played softly, playing soft classical music. It was, as usual, quiet. Then suddenly, the radio stopped, and I heard a familiar tune drifting from the roof softly, almost like a child's song. Asterisk, up to the mountaintop, ... I straightened up. It was the song written in the last letter. The song, Leela had sung the night before she disappeared. Asterisk, and now, she was singing it again. Asterisk, her voice was thin, low, and full of memories that sounded foreign to my ears, yet somehow felt familiar in my chest. As if the song wasn't just sung for herself, but also for me to remind me of something I'd never experienced. Asterisk, I stood up slowly, looking up at the ceiling. The sound was coming from the attic. Asterisk, from the attic again. Asterisk, I couldn't stay still. Maybe I should be afraid. But my curiosity was far greater than my fear. I grabbed a flashlight and climbed cautiously. Asterisk, but when I reached the bottom of the attic door and pulled the wooden rope, ... Asterisk, the attic door was already open. By itself. The old wooden ladder hung, as if welcoming me. Above, everything was dark, light at all, but I felt someone waiting for me there. Slowly, I climbed. The first step, the second. The third. Asterisk, each step sounded like a warning, but I kept climbing. Until finally, I arrived at the small, dusty room. Asterisk, and as my flashlight swept across the room, asterisk, the once empty rocking chair was now rocking gently. Asterisk, no one was sitting there, but it was as if someone had just gotten up from their seat and left the chair in a slow, tense motion. Asterisk, I took a step back. My flashlight pointed at the back. While there, dimly, I saw a small white framed door, tightly closed and almost blending into the wall. Asterisk, it was something I'd never seen before. Asterisk, beside the door. There were marks, like fingernail scratches, many, irregular, and on the door leaf, written in thin pencil, asterisk, don't open until you hear everything. I swallowed hard. My steps stopped, but my thoughts didn't. I began to realize that this house held more than just lingering spirits. It held stories that had never been heard. That night, I went downstairs, shaking. The next day, I decided to leave the house. I couldn't take it anymore. Asterisk, I packed my things, put my suitcase in the car, and stood in front of the door with the key in my hand. But when I pulled the handle, the door wouldn't open. I locked it. I unlocked it. Still, it wouldn't. Asterisk, it was as if this house refused to let me go. Asterisk, I tried the back door. Same thing. Asterisk, the windows were now locked from the inside, though I'm sure I'd left some of them open last night. Asterisk, and when I returned to my room, my suitcase was gone. I found everything neatly stacked back in the closet, as if I never intended to leave. Asterisk, it was as if this house knew everything in my heart, that even though my body wanted to flee, my heart still hung in unanswered questions. Who was Lila? What was really happening? And why did it all feel like it had already happened? Asterisk, that day I didn't leave the house. Not because I couldn't, but because I ultimately didn't want to. Asterisk, I sat for a long time in the living room. Lila's letters lay on the table. A photo of the Wiratmaja family beside it. And my notebook, which had been empty all this time, finally began to write everything I'd heard, seen, and felt since living here. Asterisk, until the afternoon. The house was quiet, asterisk, but as dusk began to fall, an orange light filtered through the gaps in the curtains. Asterisk, I saw her reflection, in the small mirror hanging in the dining room. The figure of a little girl stood behind me. Asterisk, her hair was long, braided, in 2 braids. She wore a shabby white dress with a small ribbon across her chest. She didn't move, she didn't look directly at me. But I could feel her presence, so real, so silent. Asterisk, I turned quickly. It was empty. Asterisk, I looked in the mirror again. He was still there, but this time, he slowly raised his hand and pointed toward the kitchen. Then, gone. Asterisk, my heart was beating fast. I stood up and walked toward the kitchen, half curious, half wanting to cancel everything. But something inside me felt like it was being pulled by an invisible magnet. Asterisk, under the kitchen table, I found a slightly raised tile. Asterisk, I carefully moved it. Beneath it was a small space, just big enough for an old wooden box. Inside the box, there was something that made me choke up. Asterisk, a small music box, shaped like a tiny house. I pressed the lever slowly, and as the soft melody began to play the same melody as the song the girl was singing, the light around me trembled slightly. The shadows on the walls began to move on their own, as if dancing to the beat. And amidst the song echoing in the empty room, I heard a voice again. Not singing, but whispering. Asterisk, you used to live here. I held my breath. What? Asterisk, you used to live here. Asterisk, in that instant, unfamiliar memories began to appear in my head. Flashes of images, a gently rocking chair, a curly-haired doll, laughter, then crying. A small room with a lit candle in the corner, a door locked from the outside, and a little girl's voice whispered, I've never been out of here, sis. Asterisk, the voice sounded so close, like it was whispering right behind my ear. But when I turned, there was no one there. Only the cold air, hung in the air, and the faint scent of jasmine that had returned for no reason. Asterisk, I sat on the kitchen floor, my back against the cupboard. My breathing was heavy, my thoughts a jumble. Sis, he said, sis. Asterisk, why did he call me that? Asterisk, I stared at the music box, still playing its melancholy tune. The longer I listened, the more it felt familiar. Not just because I'd heard it in my mother's letters, or because the girl had sung it the previous night, but because of that melody I'd always heard as a child. In my dreams, asterisk, I began to dig through old memories, but what emerged weren't clear images but fragments. A child crying, the loud sounds of parents arguing, a bedroom door locked from the outside, and a wooden doll sitting alone in the corner. Asterisk, the images were like a broken puzzle. But the strange thing was, they all happened inside this house. Asterisk, how could I remember something I'd never experienced? Unless, unless I'd actually lived here. Asterisk, the thoughts shook me. Asterisk, I reopened all the letters. I studied the writing, the handwriting, the sentences, asterisk, then I found a different letter. The writing was still the same, but this time it was addressed to Brother Rock. Asterisk, I choked. The letter was short, asterisk, Brother Rocca, I'm not afraid anymore. But please don't go. Okay, I'm still waiting for you in the small room. The room you once promised I'd open myself, if I had the courage. But until now, you haven't returned. Asterisk, my hands trembled as I read the last sentence. Asterisk, how could there be a letter in my name? Asterisk, my head felt full. I couldn't tell the difference between memory and illusion, but one thing was certain, I couldn't ignore it any longer. Asterisk, I stood up and walked slowly to the stairs. Asterisk, my footsteps were heavy, but my heart was firm. Asterisk, it had all been buried for too long. Lila had waited too long. Asterisk, and at the end of the upstairs hallway, asterisk, the small white door in the attic was still waiting. I stood right in front of her. Asterisk, written clearly on the doorframe, were the words, don't open until you hear everything. But I knew, I had heard it. Maybe not everything, but enough to understand one important thing. Asterisk, that little girl Leela never left, because I never really kept my promise. Asterisk, my hands slowly groped for the doorknob. It was cold. The metal was foggy, even though the air around it was dry. When I grasped it, I felt like I was holding something more than scrap metal like. I was holding a memory. I took a deep breath, then I opened it. The door opened silently. Inside, there was a small room, very small, no bigger than a wardrobe. The walls were covered in children's scribbles, pictures of mountains, houses, 2 people holding hands, and a doll with a ribbon on its head, asterisk, in the center of the room. There was a small candle that had long since burned out. But what caught my breath was the object in front of it, a child's diary. I looked at the front page. The writing was crooked and messy, but clear, asterisk Leela's diary. I read it one by one, page after page, year after year. Asterisk, the more I read, the more the lines between me and her blurred. Lila wasn't just a little girl locked up because of an illness. She wasn't just a lingering shadow of the past. She was my sister, and I was the older brother, who failed to keep his promise. Asterisk, we lived in this house when I was little, but after Leela started getting sick and hallucinating frequently, Dad became abusive. Mom gave in. I could only promise that one day, I would free her. Asterisk, but before that happened, we left this house, and left her behind. Asterisk, the diary ended with the sentence, asterisk, Brother Raka didn't come today, but that's okay, I'll still wait. Maybe tomorrow, I'll light my candle. I closed the book slowly, then I took the music box I'd brought from downstairs. Asterisk, I pulled the lever and let the music flow. Asterisk, and as the melody filled the small, frozen room, someone appeared in the doorway. Lila, her face was the same as in the mirror. Her eyes were large and deep, but now there was a faint smile on her lips. Asterisk, is it time, brother? She whispered. I lowered my head, almost crying. Yes, Leela, it's time. Asterisk, as soon as those words left my mouth, the air around me seemed to change. It was no longer as piercingly cold as before, but warm, as if the house itself were breathing a sigh of relief. Asterisk, Lila stepped slowly into the small room. Her footsteps made no sound. She walked past the music box, which was still playing softly, and then stopped right in front of the long extinguished candle. Asterisk, I squatted down beside her. Asterisk, I'm sorry, I didn't come. She said, still in a soft voice. I thought you'd forgotten. Asterisk, my heart clenched. I wanted to answer, but my voice caught in my throat. Only one sentence came out, as soft as a whisper. Asterisk, I was little too, Lila. But now I'm here. I remember you. Asterisk, Lila smiled. Her hands were small and cool as they touched my fingers. Asterisk, I'm not afraid anymore, sis. Asterisk, suddenly, from behind the wall of the room, I heard a soft sound, like a grown woman crying, holding back tears. I knew it. Mother. Asterisk, somehow, her voice drifted through the old walls, flowing with memories that had been locked away. Asterisk, I'm sorry, Mom, son, I'm sorry. Asterisk, Leela glanced over for a moment, then whispered, Mom's still sad. Dad's too. Asterisk, I held her hand. But you're free now. Asterisk, Leela nodded. She stood up and hugged me, slowly, briefly, but enough to erase all the silence that had clung to this house for decades. The music box slowly stopped playing, and as its final melody finished playing, Leela slowly walked toward the small door. Asterisk, but this time, it wasn't the door I'd entered through. Asterisk, it was a new door that had appeared on the opposite wall. Asterisk, the white door glowed softly, with a tiny gold handle in the center. Above it was written, asterisk home. Asterisk, Leela glanced back once more. Thank you, sis. Asterisk, then, ... She opened it. A warm light greeted her, and as the door closed softly behind her, the air in the house felt lighter. Asterisk, it was like a weight that had been pressing down from all directions had finally been released. Asterisk, and for the first time since I'd lived here, everything was truly silent. Asterisk, a silence not of emptiness, but of peace. Asterisk, I sat quietly for a long time on the attic floor. The dusk light seeped slowly through the small, dusty window, and for the first time, I didn't feel alone in this house. Esteban, though physically, I truly was. Asterisk, then suddenly, amidst the solemn silence, I heard it. Soft, soft. Asterisk, a little girl's voice, singing the same music box song, with a clearer, happier, freer tone. It was Leela's voice, but not from inside the house. Not from behind the door. Not from the attic. From within my heart. Asterisk, the voice was no longer inviting. No longer whimpering, no longer calling out in fear. Asterisk, now it sang like a child finally allowed to play outside after a long period of confinement. Asterisk, I closed my eyes, letting her voice fill the entire space of my soul. Then, a memory emerged, not blurry, not fragmented, but whole. The last day I saw Leela, when she was small and sick, hugging her doll and asking, Sis, we can go out together, right? Asterisk, and I answered at the time, yes. Later when you're strong, but she was never strong enough, and I never went back. Until now, I stood up and slowly descended from the attic. Nothing moved, no strange sounds, no scent of jasmine. This house was empty again, but this time, it was truly empty. No occupants, no stories lingering in its walls. Asterisk, I entered my old room. I sat on the bed, asterisk, and for the first time since I came here, I felt like I could sleep. Before I closed my eyes, I heard one last whisper. Good night, sis. I smiled. Good night, Lila, asterisk. I closed my eyes that night with a calm heart, and for the first time since setting foot in this house, I didn't dream. No crying, no whispers, no shadows waiting at the end of the hall. Just ... sleep. and when I woke the next morning, sunlight shone through the bedroom window with a strange yet comforting warmth. This house felt alive, but not because there were residents inside, but because the spirits trapped inside had finally been able to leave. I walked around the house. Every corner looked different. The living room, once dusty and silent, was now brightly lit. The windows, once silent, now opened slowly as the breeze passed. Even the small attic room, which had been the place of farewell the night before, was gone. Not only was the door gone, but the entire room. It was as if it had never existed. It was as if this house knew its work was done. I sat at the dining table, staring at a cup of tea I had prepared, who knows when. Then I looked at the living room wall, which was once covered in strange graffiti. Now, it's clean, tidy, quiet. But I know that in the silence of this house for the past 50 years, someone has been waiting. And I, who arrived without knowing anything, have become part of that story, the final piece needed to make everything complete. I gazed out the window, watching the village streets slowly come to life. The faces of residents who had previously been reluctant to approach this house now passed by. Some of them even turned to me and smiled. Somehow, I felt they sensed it too, that this house was different. I took a deep breath. Then I whispered once more, thank you, Lila, and I'm sorry it took me 50 years to return. The words just came out of nowhere. But when I said them, it felt like I'd opened another door, not a physical one, but a space inside myself that I'd always kept tightly closed, a space called regret. But that morning, for the first time, I no longer felt empty. This house, which had been known for years as a cursed house, an abandoned house, a house that no one had ever touched, now felt warm. It was as if every wall was thanking me for finally being able to rest, and I began to think, maybe this house shouldn't be left empty anymore. That night, I returned to my room. This time, not out of fear, not because I was looking for voices, but because I truly wanted to stay. Not just stay, but stay. I started cleaning the attic even though the secret room was gone. I still wanted to make it tidy. The next day, I went into town. I rented a pickup truck. I bought a few simple furnishings, a bookshelf, a chandelier, a houseplant. Then I brought it all home. And when the neighbors saw me moving things into the old house, they began to approach. Not to ask suspicious questions, but to help. Mrs. Rini, the owner of the shop across the street, brought a broom and a mop. Mr. Dardo, the village carpenter, came with repair tools and said, if you really want to live here, I'll help fix those windows. That day, the house came back to life. Not because of a spirit, but because of a presence. Because someone had finally returned and brought hope. I stood in the doorway, looking at the living room, now clean and filled. And for the first time since childhood, I dared to say, this house is ours. Lila, it's not empty anymore. And with those words, I felt as if the entire universe in this house, once filled with silence and shadows, finally closed its story quietly. Several weeks had passed since that last night. I still lived here, now truly settled. But there was one thing I hadn't done, and I knew I had to do it alone. One morning, I went up to the attic, not to look for anything, for the secret room had disappeared forever, but to write. I brought with me an old diary, Mother's, which I had found in a drawer in the living room. The pages were yellow and worn, but her handwriting was still clear. There were pages of memories. About Father, about me, and about Leela, about guilt, about unspoken prayers, and about long, unanswered waits. I added a page to the end of the book, with a black pen and a lightly trembling hand. I wrote, to Leela, my little sister. I've returned, even if it took too long. I'm sorry for leaving you alone. I'm sorry for letting this house sit idle for so long, but now, it's all over. I've kept my promise, and you've come home first. Now this house is no longer a place of waiting, but a place of remembrance. You will never be forgotten. Goodbye, Lila. Welcome home. Raka. I closed the book slowly and placed it under the attic window, right where the morning sun shone in and warmed the old wooden floor. Then I went downstairs, opened the front window, and looked up at the sky, so blue that day. I don't know if anyone else will ever know the story of this house. It might not matter to the outside world, but to me, this house isn't just a place. This house is a promise. A promise I've finally kept. And for that I know. I'm never truly alone here. And that concludes this mysterious tale. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you enjoyed every part of the story. Don't forget to support this channel by subscribing, liking, and commenting. See you in the next horror story.